Ladies and gentlemen, I just started a new book maybe 2 days ago, 3 days ago, and I'm about one third of the way through. As such, this will be part one of three for this series on this amazing book called Exit the Cave. Holy smokes, guys. We are really on the right track, I feel. Kind of wish I read this book sooner, but it is what it is. Fantastic book so far. And it is by Howdie Mickoski. And we are going to go through some notable pieces from this book, and I'm going to share them as we go through. I've selected a bunch of excerpts that we're going to read through. But I just want to say, in general, this book starts off from the perspective of the allegory of Plato's cave. And the main idea is, goes back to the story and really it talks about that in the early sections. I don't really actually include a lot of excerpts from those discussions, but it's the same. It's this whole idea of basically everything you perceive in the world, right? Everything that we know, because our memories we are tabula rasa when we enter this world. This is all we know. This is all we see, are what's picked up by our five senses. But the cave allegory gives this whole idea of, well, what if you're just seeing projections of shadows, but you think that's all there is, right? Everybody's behind you, but you're not able to turn your head. You're stuck, and you're seeing projections of shadows, and you have no idea what's really happening. You think the shadows are the people, but that's actually just people walking behind you, and the fire's projecting the shadows. So, like, you're trying to do your best to interpret things and understand the nature of reality, but you have such a narrow view of reality that your attempts are totally off base. And then what happens when you actually exit the cave and then you come back in, you try to explain to people and they're just like, what are you talking about? This isn't. Anyways, it uses this as a jumping off point to then get into the nitty gritty. But where I'm starting with this review is once we get into the nitty gritty, is once we get into all of these great concepts that I think so many of you guys on this channel resonate with. And I just feel like Howdie Mickoski is doing such a good job in this book, summarizing so many key points and ideas that we have already covered on this channel. So I just love it so far, and I'm very curious to see where it goes from here. I just got to the section where it's talking about NDEs, so we're going to talk about that in part two, but really, really fascinating stuff so far. So without further ado, let's get into all of the good stuff. Hold on, I'm just going to write something down real quick for you guys as a banner. You're going to see what it is in a moment. Hold on, let me just do it like this. Boom. Okay. You're going to see what I just entered in a moment. But now, before we get into the video, I just want to make an announcement. I just created a new Instagram account for this channel. The reason why is people were asking to contact me or send me ideas or whatever, just to connect with me in different ways. So I decided to start an Instagram account for this channel that's connected to this channel. It's literally right here. It's called Pink Tourmaline Huzefa. And you can follow me there. You can message me there. I will be posting some content there as well. But I think primarily right now, this is a means for just people to connect and follow, and you can send me different ideas. I know I was having people email me stuff, but I think this is going to be a much easier way to connect and follow. And like I said, it'll be another outlet for me to post content. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this up here for the duration of the video. And if you guys want to check that out, like I said, follow me there, connect with me there, and let's just keep making this channel better and better. And once again, why am I reviewing this book? Because I can't remember who now. Was it Silver Soul? Was it Mahela? I don't remember, but somebody, obviously in one of my live chats or whatever, recommended this book to me. And so that's why I'm covering it. That's why we're doing it right now. And by the way, I would love to get Howdie Mickoski on the channel. So we're going to see if we can make that happen. I'd love to interview him. I thought the Tony Sayers interview was incredible. So we'll see if we can make that happen. But without further ado, let's get in to the good stuff. So first of all, who is Howdie Mickoski? Let me give you guys a quick summary. Exit the Cave, he argues that earthly life may be a deceptive cave designed to keep souls trapped in reincarnation. Again, that's the cave reference back to Plato's cave. Drawing from ancient texts, Gnostic ideas, NDEs, and modern simulation-style stories, Mickoski questions whether karma guides, life reviews, and the light are truly benevolent or part of a system that recycles consciousness. His main message is about recognizing the trap, reclaiming sovereignty, similar to what Tony Sayers talks about, and refusing to be sent back into the cycle. The cyclic existence, as it's called in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So many overlaps with so many of these books. It's wild. All right. Let's get into the mix. Here we go. First excerpt, what if it's all a lie? This is taken from the very beginning of the book, and this might actually be the very first page. I can't remember exactly, but let's just lay the foundation. What if you woke up one morning, say this morning, with the crazy notion that everything you had ever been told was a lie? It's kind of like the beginning of the premise of the movie The Matrix, right? It reminds you of Morpheus saying that everything you were taught in school, from your parents, from religion, from TV, was a form of deception. Now, obviously, I don't think he means that our parents are trying to deceive us, but they're restating things that they think are true, but obviously may all be deceptive because it's part of the system. That all the systems you trusted, that you believed were created for your best interest, were false. A calculated series of lies designed as a type of control mechanism to keep you and everyone under the spell of the wizards who control this realm. What if you found that even all the areas that seem designed to assist you, such as religion, spirituality, or self-help, are all part of the deception as well, or co-opted by the deception? Let's put it that way, right? I think a lot of these things, in some cases, may have been potentially started with the right intentions, but then co-opted. What if you woke up one moment, say this moment right now, and realize that you in fact have died, that you are in the after-death realm? A tunnel of white light appears before you, and a loving angel or your loving grandmother are there calling you towards that light. What are you going to do? Is this light a blessing or the way you get trapped further? Boom, bombshell. Now, for those of you guys who have been watching this channel, it's not a bombshell, but if you guys are new and you're like, what are you talking about? Maybe it's a bit of a bombshell. And let's get into the mix. Here we go. We come back to this idea once again that Earth is a Loosh farm, a farm of souls. And here we go. I really like this little paragraph here because he talks about some of the origins. Like, there's so much of this book that is great summaries of all this information that I've been researching and reviewing for the past couple months. And this is where this idea of Earth being a farm, a soul farm, for the extraction of Loosh, which is apparently some amazing energy resource. So this is a little summary of all the people that have talked about this. So this topic about Earth being a farm of souls has been around for many decades, but generally on the fringes of any alternative research. Jordaeff often claimed that we were on Earth here to become food for the moon. This guy dates back. I haven't read his book yet, but apparently this guy's notion of where food for the moon comes from like the 1920s. So a long time ago, relative to where we are now, about 100 years ago. Most thought he was being symbolic, but likely not. Do you know that the most famous moon during the year is also known as the harvest moon, right? I mean, that could be a coincidence. I don't know in terms of the name. Who knows? But it's a weird coincidence. Is it really about humans harvesting their crops or the moon harvesting its human crops? The subject was brought up by famed out-of-body researcher Robert Monroe, who in chapter 12 of his book, Far Journeys in 1971, claims aliens required what he called Loosh energy. And we're going to come back to Robert Monroe later on in this video. Our realm became one built to provide this Loosh to the alien controllers. I discussed this book in detail in chapter 3. Val Valerian, who claimed to be a former CIA agent, wrote a series of Matrix books beginning in 1990 with the same subject matter of Earth being a farm. Yeah, so I looked this guy up as well, Val Valerian, or I think his name is Valdemar Valerian is his full name. But he wrote a lot about, I couldn't find any information about the CIA part, but again, he's saying he claims to be a CIA agent. Maybe that's not possible to be verified, for who knows why, but yeah, anyway, so yeah, he wrote about all sorts of phenomenon, extraterrestrial phenomenon, etc. And he also had the same theory. Okay. Another amazing takeaway, another excerpt that I flagged, how to live for the moment. Now, when I say the moment, I don't mean live in the moment. Let's enjoy every moment and let's not think too much about, more about like the power of now. Let's not think about the future and the past. Let's live in the moment. That's not what I mean here. When I say how to live for the moment, what he's talking about in this paragraph is treat life as a training ground to prepare yourself for the moment of the crossover, for the moment of death, right? Like at that moment, prepare yourself as you will basically need to be mentally prepared, spiritually prepared to make the right choices at that moment. So that's what he's talking about. So to know what to do in the after-death realm, we have to get prepared while still in this one. It is actually one of the important practices while in the body, but it tends to be downplayed against more standard practices of meditation, yoga, mindfulness. Once a person finally sees that this is not a world set out to help us or grant us our wishes, but is a harvesting farm of our energy, we can make a shift. We stop focusing on how to become important and use our time to prepare for the moment where escape is possible. And this is tough, I think, for all of us, right? Even of us that are more awakened than others, it's still hard to not go after goals, professional goals, different things like that that feed our ego. It's going to be hard. I'd like to believe there's a way that we can balance it all, but what he's saying, I think, is the message here is to shift out of that and reprioritize things and just really make this our central focus. And hopefully we're getting closer and closer to that end. You have to take how you live to heart and have no regrets in this life. Again, because regrets can be a tool to trick you into returning. Regrets, guilt. I've heard this from other folks as well. This is not about becoming perfect or a saint, which is great, right? Because perfection, I think, is going to be a futile goal. But to use this life to get everything figured out and get past the Demiurge, because if you don't, you will be right back here after a Westworld type memory wipe. No matter how much you moved along in the last life, you're back at square one in new life, ignorant of everything once again because of the memory wipe. All the exalted knowledge we have come to believe only has value in the moment. Okay. If you guys are unfamiliar with Gnosticism, the Demiurge is the purported creator of this material world, and basically a self-proclaimed God, but not the real God, not the God mind, but instead a pretender God, I guess you could say. And also the God that I think some people equate with Yahweh, like kind of the negative God that's portrayed in the Old Testament, things like that is jealous, that is wrathful, all these different things. So that's who the Demiurge is. Okay, this is crazy. Before I started even reading all these books, but as I started having my mind blown open by David Icke and others, I started saying this. I started saying, man, if it does kind of make sense that maybe we're not being cradled in this beautiful, like, embrace of love from above, which I thought originally from the New Age perspective and all the NDEs and stuff that I was hearing. When you look at how clownish this world is, how perverse, how backwards it is, how filled it is with negativity and hate, and we even see it now with social media. It's just out there. People say social media is not real. Oh, it's very real. It's very real. All the negative and nasty comments, that's how people are really feeling. Oh, they never say this to my face. Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's not real. That means they're just too afraid to say it to your face. Like half the people in the comments, they're not going to say that stuff to my face or your face or anything like that because they're afraid of the repercussions. Most people don't know how to defend themselves. You know what I mean? But that's how they're feeling. They want to say it, but they can't do it. And so we just see what's really happening here. And it's like, well, if everything is just all from this position of love and like, where are we getting all this from? And I remember when this first started opening in my mind, I'm like, well, this kind of makes sense if we are being cradled, in fact, by negative entities. As above, so below. And I didn't read this from any of these books. I didn't hear anybody else say this. That just popped into my head. Like, oh, that kind of makes sense. I don't know where it's in the Bible. I don't know where I heard that, but that kind of makes sense. And now other people, like as I'm coming across these texts, other people are saying the same thing. It's just so cool to me that these are completely unique and random people. I'd never heard anybody else use this line and in regards to this topic, but then it just popped in my head, and it seems that it's everywhere in this literature and in people's minds. So it's just really cool. But it just makes me feel like I'm on the right track. You know what I'm saying? Okay, here we go. Another thing that should become obvious if you look at this reality honestly is how easily we all get fooled. Once you realize that all the major organizations, government, media, advertising are run by people trained in how to fool and manipulate, it makes sense what our realm has become. Following the Hermetic principle, as above, so below. Is it any surprise that the after-death astral realm would be one of pure deception? Right? If the realm above or the realm kind of controlling us, the entities controlling us are full of deception, it kind of starts to make sense that we seem to be surrounded by lies. And I've talked about this in so many videos. You think, you get kind of brainwashed by the society and you're like, nah, man, people are generally good. People are generally trying to do. And I do think actually people are good. I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about the systems or what has been acceptable in our society. Just look at the way food companies, pharmaceutical companies are run. Advertising is directed at people. When do you ever look at a commercial and be like, oh, yeah, everything they're saying is pretty legit? It's just fake, 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 just saying we've got the best pizza in town. Why? Why do you have the best pizza? This shampoo does this to your hair, and then you see the video, the graphics of like the compounds coming up and healing the strands. And it's like, is that really what's happening? This image that you're presenting? Oh, well, it's just a model. Yeah, but you're making it look like it's literally performing miracles. That's one side. And then we look at the way that politicians, of course they lie. We look at the system of law, right? I'm an attorney. I know how this is too, right? It's just lawyers lie, but they're like, well, I have to defend my client vigorously and in their best interest and all this stuff. And you go along and you're complacent with lies, or even like they may not want to call it lies, but even the specific representations of the truth, or you may feel one way about your client's guilt or innocence, or in a civil case, whether or not you're liable or what, but you're going to defend them. They're paying you and you say, that's my duty. What? But that's your duty. Shouldn't we just all have a mutual interest in getting to the bottom of things, to just finding truth? But like, we've just all been so brainwashed to follow these different societal norms, claiming that it's in the interest of justice. Like, it's just so backwards. Where does it all come from? As above, so below. It starts to make sense. Whew. Got worked up there. The only savior you need is you. This feels very, very Tony Sayers-ish, right? I love this. All right, check this out. A great shift will occur when you realize that you do not need a savior, nor do you need to pray to anything outside of yourself. You, as in the essence part of your soul, is the most powerful thing within this creation. This is why the system is set up to distract, confuse, and deceive it. And it does make you think, right? When you think about all the deception and all the lengths to which these entities or whoever is in control are going to deceive you, it makes you think, wait, I must be pretty special if they need to go through all this rigmarole to keep me stuck. Like, I must be pretty powerful. It makes sense. And this same idea, I know the Y-Files has kind of debunked Alien Interview. I don't know how you guys feel about it. There's also some things in there that are kind of weird that didn't really resonate with me. But this notion that our souls itself, not some savior, not God separated from us, but us, ourselves, our spiritual essence is all powerful and can create. That's in there as well. And all I can say is when I read that, it really, really resonated with me. And again, it makes sense why they'd be trying so hard to confuse us and deceive us, because they don't want us to realize that. Because if you turned all that energy that is always focused on something outside yourself and focused it within, there would be an explosion of power. That power can then be used to override all the systems and tricks that have been keeping you here. When you learn the only savior you need is you, and the only prayer you ever need to make is to your true self, the exit is closer. I love that. I love that. That's so dope. One thing I've been doing lately is I need to make it a more formalized practice, but just saying positive stuff to myself. But I've been doing it regularly, but not as systematically as I'd like to. And why not? Man, we all have a lot of great things to say to ourselves, a lot of things to pat ourselves on the back. Like, let's get in the habit of doing that and empowering ourselves with that positivity. Just like if other people were doing to us, it doesn't make you feel good when your parents or your friends or your family say good things about you. I mean, let's do it to ourselves. Why not? It's right here, baby. Pink Tourmaline, right here. Self-love. That's what it's all about. Keeps coming back to Pink Tourmaline. The food chain is insane. Part 1. We come back to this idea. I first started thinking about this when I came across Gnosticism, that the whole way the world is set up, we just think, well, this is life. This is nature. What? You're going to argue against nature? This is just that you have to accept it. Okay. Yeah, but something deep down inside of us, I think all of us, looks at the way this earth is set up and looks at the food chain, looks at the fact that we have to devour to survive, as a perverse system. Now, the materialists would say, well, that's just how it's evolved via natural selection and evolution and whatnot. Okay. But for those who are clinging to some idea of a religion via a loving creator, like, it just feels weird that you would inherently design a system where, hey, sometimes you have to do bad things and no, literally Every day, multiple times a day, you are destroying to survive, whether it's plants or animals. Don't think just because you're vegan, right? Like you are killing living organic matter to survive one way or the other. There's no way around it. That's weird. If there really was a happy, loving deity in charge of this place, it could, of course, be a much more peaceful experience. However, we live in a physical and energetic slaughterhouse. You're living in many ways a computer game character or semi-programmed robot in a very insane system. How many worms have just died in the last 5 seconds to feed all the birds? How many mice died to feed all the cats? Does a worm scream while it's being eaten? What set up such an insane and sick system? You don't think about that. The Demiurge, maybe we did when we were kids, but then you're kind of hammered down, smushed down, and you forget about it. The Demiurge, that's who, the one also called Rex Mundi, the devil, Satan, or Jehovah in the Old Testament. Rex Mundi is from the Cathars, by the way, which we're going to go into in a moment. That is the real creator of all the simulated reality. This presence, also known, can be called it. Can you now see why the computer realm in our world is called IT? It is an extension of the original artificial intelligence, the Demiurge, that is in charge of the simulation. So there's another excerpt next or later on, but it's in the Robert Monroe section that again talks about the insanity of the food chain. Yeah. Howdie Mickoski just does such a great job of taking all these different tidbits and just beautifully explaining them and laying them out in these nice paragraphs. What about this idea that we all have to some varying degrees? I mean, maybe excluding psychopaths or certain people on this planet. But for the most part, don't we all try and make the world a better? But I'm going to make an impact. I want to make the world a better place. And Howdie Mickoski basically says this is part of the trick. This is part of the trap because it's futile, or the system is working against you so hard that you can try and think you're making a difference, but it doesn't really matter. And that's part of the deception. Check this out. For all the meditation, group prayers, law of attraction, and positive thinking, is human life and the planet really any better than it was 100 years ago, 1,000, anytime? Things seem, in fact, to be much worse. I've said this many times, right? How is it that we're, quote unquote, evolving, growing, learning, becoming better technologically, becoming more aware, becoming more tolerant, all this stuff that we think is happening? But the world seems far worse in many, many ways. Some people would say, oh, no, it was way more brutal in the past. But you might feel that way if you live in very select areas of this world. I know LA, like I love LA, okay? But I know I'm so lucky to live here and have the life that I had. But I think for so much of the world, it's not like that. It was a hard realization for me to come to that this entire reality is nothing but a clown show circus. I call this clown world all the time. Granted, at times life is beautiful, interesting, and interactive, but the foundation is pain and suffering. For that is how the energy Loosh is created for the harvest. This place has never been any better, nor will it ever improve. Now, never any better. I don't know. I'd have to. How do we like quantify that? I don't know. Maybe there are slight variations or slight improvements here or there, but I'd have to really think about it in somewhat of a quantitative fashion, like a loose quantitative fashion. Has there been some slight improvement? But I see what he's saying. I could and also with the population being as big as it is now, right? Maybe you could have a greater percentage of the world having a better time, but just because of the sheer numbers, you could still have so many people suffering. So the Loosh output could be consistent or still actually substantially improved. If you look at it like that, this place has never been any better. Okay. This belief that things can get better is one of this realm's most ingenious and insidious traps. Everything we have been doing our entire lives is its very core designed in some way to fail. That hits hard. That hits hard. But I think it's something amazing that Howdie Mickoski is talking about, and that I think we all need to think about hardcore, as opposed to just blindly trudging forward and pursuing whatever goal of world improvement we're seeking, like most of us do. How many of us, when we graduate high school or graduate college, I want to go improve this. I want to save the world doing that. I want to be the best doctor. I want to be the best lawyer. I want to be the best teacher, whatever it may be, so I can impact people. But let's think bigger. Because is that really changing things? Or maybe it is, but then maybe there are systems or entities above us that are making other modifications that are resetting whatever positive vibrations we're emitting. And we have to do something different to really make a change, to really break the negativity cycle. It's good for us to think about. It's really good for us to think about. Because maybe there is a different way, a different path to doing what we truly want to do. which is help. In this next section, he talks about a couple different religious groups, namely the Cathars and the Gnostics, because he says, hey, look, many of these narratives in mainstream religion, they just talk about a loving God creating the universe and creating the earth and all the stuff and wanting this to be for our benefit and have us tested. So he's like, where did these ideas of, wait a minute, like you see how twisted the world is. We have this idea that perhaps there's like a negative entity that's a creator, but that's not really talked about in a lot of these mainstream religions. But it is talked about in certain religions that were effectively destroyed, that were effectively slaughtered. And why were they slaughtered? That's an interesting question. Were they onto something? I don't know. But anyways, two of these religions that he mentions that have this same type of a narrative, that we are effectively in a trap, and it was a negative entity that built this world, or this copy of a world, if you will, simulation, if you will. And one of them is the Cathars. The other one is the Gnostics. So we're going to talk about this first, because I'm new to the Cathars. I know a lot more about Gnosticism. The Cathars saw two creators: the good God of the New Testament, who is the creator of the spiritual realm, as opposed to the evil God, whom Cathars identified as Rex Mundi, who is the Old Testament creator, Yahweh, of the physical world, all that is changing. All visible matter, including the human body, was created by Rex Mundi, and therefore was tainted with sin, not because of something Eve or Adam did or did not do, right? That story of eating the apple or whatever, but simply because the material world is an artificial hologram or simulation. Generally, Rex Mundi is equated with Satan, but more often he was connected with the fallen angel concept of Lucifer, light bearer. These ideas, of course, put them in direct odds with the Church of Rome, whose fundamental principle was that there was only one God who created all things visible and invisible. The Cathars were at odds with the church for most of their beliefs. And then eventually, I think that led to them being destroyed. He said in this, again, I'm not an expert on the Cathars, but he said in a later section that there was a crusade against the Cathars and they were effectively wiped out. Similar to the Gnostics, pretty wild. And for the Gnostics, they said to create the material world, the Demiurge. So just to give you some of the backstory, the Demiurge is a creation of Sophia, and Sophia originates from the original source creator. And it's kind of in a aborted creation, a creation that she basically rejected. And so what the Demiurge then did, as I'll read here, is he made a mirror image of the good place, the Pleroma, and that's this. The creation was referred to by the Gnostics as a simulation, which became an inverse world of that which it had been copied from. Everything in our reality is a type of hologram, from the earth to planets to beings. Gnostics claim that the creator, God of the Old Testament, was the Demiurge. Yahweh was the Demiurge, and not the good God of the Pleroma. When Sophia had seen the outcome of her birthing attempt, she became depressed, filled with guilt, and wept continually. The Divine Father saw her pain and forgave her, but demanded she stay in the ninth heaven, the layer of the sky closest to the Pleroma above Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth is another name for the Demiurge, to find a way to atone for her error. So it's interesting because when you talk about this world being a copy of the Pleroma, that is also echoed by Intuitive Underground and some of these other readings from remote viewers, that we are in a sort of like a bad copy of base reality. Like, God, I just don't know how it exactly all connects, but there's definitely connections there that need to be explored further. All right, next in this section, he talks about other individuals outside of mainstream religion that also have similar narratives about a negative entity designing the planet and for the purpose of extracting energy or loosh. By the way, the Gnostics talk about, what do they call it? The harvest of emotions or something like that. But they refer to something exactly like what Robert Monroe talks about. And Robert Monroe coined the phrase loosh, and this idea that we're a farm, that is also talked about in Gnosticism as well. I made a video about that on the channel. Robert Monroe became the foremost researcher on the out-of-body phenomenon. In chapter 12 of his book, Far Journeys, he presents an out-of-body experience, which he had where he met a being of light who provided him with details of our realm. The being described the earth as a giant experiment for the creator beings to build the perfect loosh harvest system. Loosh being a word Monroe coined to mean specific type of harvestable energy that the creator beings require. While some energy is harvested while beings are still alive, the majority is taken at their death. This energy is claimed to be used by the Demiurge and Archons to extend their own lifespans. I would argue that this phrase, placed into computer terms, means that energy goes into the computer simulation power grid to keep it running, hence extend the life of the simulation. In order to have this occur, a garden was created by these beings to farm their food source, and that's the garden that we're in, and we're the food source. Again, this lines up with what Intuitive Underground has talked about, that basically the loosh that is being harvested, in fact, sustains this prison and this farm that we are in. So it's like a self-sustaining energy cycle. And then maybe the excess loosh is siphoned off to, for other things, as he mentioned here, to extend their life, or who knows what else. Okay, now this is more stuff from the Robert Monroe section, but it relates back to the food chain. So that's why I said this is Food Chain is Insane, part 2. Our world is one that is dominated by what we call the food chain, a need to eat other things to survive. Monroe, I mean, just right, like, it just does not resonate. You could say all day long, well, that's just how it is. Shut up. Like, how are you going to argue against nature? Well, hey, I'm sorry, but if you get in touch with yourself and just think, does it make sense? Does it feel normal? It feels messed up. I think most people have felt that at some point in their lives. And then you were just like, well, I guess that's reality. But yeah, it's weird. It's super weird. Monroe presents that the food chain has only been set up to maximize loosh at death. No creature can survive long enough on Earth or in this realm without eating something, right? A vegetarian may think eating a carrot is not the same as eating a duck, but each are living organisms which are only here to be part of the loosh farm. And their death is the same as any other creature's death from that perspective. Just what I was saying, right? Vegetarian or not, you're devouring organic matter. If a good God creator was really the one who set up this place, and if energy was needed to keep it running, a much better system could have been developed. People try to ignore this problem, but it is critical to see that the only reason a food chain exists is because it comes from the mind of that which is evil. Now, look, is this the only possibility? I'm not saying it's the only possibility. There could be other reasons or explanations that we can't potentially grapple with or understand. I mean, look, anything is possible. But I will say, from where our logic stands right now, it sure does feel a whole lot more logical and realistic that it's a perverse system set up for a perverse motive than the other way around. If you're arguing the other side, it's more, well, that's just what it is. And for sure that's what it is. And maybe you can't explain it, but that's just what it is. Whereas on this side of the argument, we can actually use logic and don't have to just say, well, this is how it is. It's like, we can also say, this kind of makes sense from our ability to logic through it. Now, this gets into a fascinating discussion. When I first saw the movie The Matrix, I remember I thought it was amazing. It blew me away. It felt incredible. I was like, man, it just hit me so hard. I was 19 when I saw it, didn't know anything about it. I just went with some of my buddies. And I was like, that was one of the greatest movies. It's not the greatest movie I've ever seen. And maybe because it resonated with me and so many people on some deeper level, right? The idea of us being food, right? For the AI systems how wild is that? But my one gripe with the movie at the time was, okay, everything seems great. Everything makes sense, except for this fact. If they needed organic matter as a battery, they said in the movie, combined with the type of fusion or whatever, and they talked about the heat. That was different. It wasn't it wasn't harvesting emotions or negative energy or stuff like that. They said it was the heat produced by us, and then it was combined with a certain type of fusion and all this stuff. So it was a little different. But I remember watching that movie and being like, well, if humans can eventually wake up and have the capacity to figure out what's going on, why don't they just make a matrix full of like elephants or chimpanzees or dogs or something like that, where they don't have the mental capacity to figure out potentially what's going on? That was I was like, I didn't really explain that. And couldn't that avoid all these issues, right? And the same thing, I have the same question with this system, right? Why not just reduce the capacity of the inhabitants to such a degree that they can't ever understand what's going on? Wouldn't that make more sense? Well, this section explains, and I had a theory that maybe it had something to do with this, but this explains why we are here and why the system is set up with us. And it's basically about a maximization of loosh output. So I think what it is, just like designing any system, they're trying to maximize the efficiency. And for whatever reason, whether it's our intelligence or emotional complexity, but these factors make us the perfect source for maximizing loosh output. So it's sort of like a risk reward thing. It's probably they weren't getting enough loosh output from other entities, from animals, from plants, from things like that, from the dinosaurs that I think are talked about here. So they had to modify this system and this setup to have us in there just to maximize illusion. Then it probably comes with the added downside that, but wait a minute, but these beings can now actually understand the system to some extent. Okay, let's do the memory wipe, so that reduces it, but still capable. So, anyways, I just thought this was really fascinating because it was the first time I've seen something explain why you would have entities in the system that are able to theoretically figure it out. That doesn't seem smart. Oh well, okay, it's a trade-off in terms of maximizing Loosh. With dinosaurs as the first creations, the Demiurge either realized in the time that they could not provide a high enough content of Loosh, or the dinosaurs figured out some way to block the harvest. Consequently, they were wiped out by the first reset, which is why the dinosaur story is so controversial. It was not from an accidental asteroid. You could call it the first flood, a premeditated act of destruction. Monroe's book claims new Loosh creatures were created, which seems like modern plants and animals. Perhaps in these early versions were also creatures we today call Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon. They both seem to be much more attuned to this environment, with thick body hair, which acted as a type of fur, which would reduce the need for clothing. The overseers of the experiment noticed that when creatures battled for scarce resources or conflicts ensued, the Loosh harvest was very high. This is why animals were given fangs, claws, or great speed in order to prolong these fights to the death as long as possible, and thereby creating even more Loosh. More suffering, especially prior to death, meant more Loosh. This can also be how systems of human sacrifice came to be a demand by the gods to give them a good suffering death, spectacle as food and entertainment combined, and with the hope that gods would not eat the one performing the sacrifice. Not only would there be a good Loosh harvest, they could make the humans doing it believe that they were appeasing the gods and making things better and safer here on earth. Even Jesus was a blood sacrifice. They also found that suffering, especially exceptional fear, would produce more Loosh as well. And as such, the realm was modified to generate constant fear. Of course, over time, the controllers came to realize that they did not even need to generate real threats for humans to be fearful over. They just need to present news that there could be a threat, and that was enough. I think they're talking about mainstream media here. With the realization that conflict provided bigger Loosh harvest, Monroe wrote that the creator beings reset the previous world and brought in this new one as a new experiment. Again, Intuitive Design Underground talks about this realm as a bit of an experiment being run from base reality. So they use the same verbiage. In this new world included a new being, us. We were created as a creature to generate these high levels of conflict and inflict these high levels of suffering. The controllers of this experiment want. The human soul does not want suffering and conflict. This is what the controllers of the experiment want. Wild. I mean, before we go on to the next section, I mean, you could say, well, wait a minute. Animals developing the ability to defend themselves or people or whatever. This is all an arms race. This is just natural selection that you're talking about, not some external agenda to maximize Loosh. You know, and that's kind of what I've learned and what I've been taught in school and things like that. And you could see that, right? This idea of natural selection. Well, okay, well, they're being attacked by this animal, but the ones that developed this genetic mutation, therefore, was able to fend off the predators as best, so they survived and procreated, and so that's why we have this prey predator dynamic now. But this also makes a lot of sense too, to make everything a maximum struggle, right? Where there's so many beings and entities in constant conflict. Like, I don't know, man. It makes a lot of sense if you look at it through this lens, that it's all to just create a constant battleground in nature, in life, even with us. And I think ultimately we are at the top. Like, when we say we're at the top of the food chain, I know we think like, hey, everything is, we can eat everything. But when I say the top of the food chain, I mean we're the maximum Loosh producers because of all the emotions and the fear and the complexity of emotions that we can have. So that's what I mean. Okay, next we're going to talk about Castaneda. And this is somebody that I need to read his books. This is somebody that was also recommended to me, but this is another person that he talks about in his teachings, where he also mentions this idea of a negative creator building this realm for the purpose of harvesting Loosh energy. What is most interesting about this chapter is that Don Juan, this is the book that Carlos Castaneda mentioned. This Don Juan character offers suggestions of how to get free of the predators. Claims are not to go out and fix the world. Okay, this is very important. So it goes back to that idea of, hey, this idea that we can improve the world, that's a red herring. But focus on oneself to discipline ourselves to the point where they will not touch us. Discipline in this instance does not mean daily routines or focus, but the capacity to face odds that are not included in our expectations. The art of facing infinity without flinching, not because they are strong and tough, because they are filled with awe. By storing up what Castaneda called inner silence, one could make the glowing coat of awareness unpalatable to the flyers. Basically, what he's saying is, if we get this idea of inner silence, we're not producing the loosh. We're not producing the energy that they can feed off of. We don't attack them. We don't go after them, right? He said we just make it so that they do not like the taste of our loosh energy, so they stop trying to eat us. That's it, right? Stop trying to go after them. Stop trying to fight them, because I imagine that's futile. Maybe that actually makes us create more loosh. No, just become sturdy within. Stop emitting this energy force. And then that's our way of defeating them. The grand trick is to tax the flyer's mind with discipline, with inner silence, and the foreign installation will flee. Wow. All goes to the same idea. So many different people are saying the same thing. We were set up to fail. Again, another statement back to this idea of, like, let's stop blaming ourselves. Let's stop looking at ourselves and looking in the mirror and saying, we are bad, we are flawed, man, we just can't get out of our own way. Well, maybe we're just never going to succeed. And that's the paradigm. That's what we're stuck in. We're led to believe that we can succeed, but we can't. And then we're sitting here spinning our wheels, feeling bad about ourselves. Like, let's just stop. Let's wait a minute. Let's take a look at reality and not be so harsh on ourselves. Show ourselves self-love, because that's what we deserve, because perhaps we were set up to fail. Some might say humans are a failed experiment and we should be eliminated. I mean, based on how we have behaved and mistreated the planet and each other, I can see how many have come to this conclusion. But if this realm was not created by a loving God, but an evil demiurge, it all begins to make sense. Humans act the way that we have been designed to, right? We're programmed genetically to do X, Y, and Z, to procreate, we have sexual urges. We have urges to devour food, to do all these negative things, but that's how we're designed. And it's amazing how many can actually break that conditioning and behave in a somewhat sane manner, which we can, I think. But if you believe in a loving creator, then it will seem humans have somehow failed here. But when you see, right? So we look at ourselves as failure under that paradigm. But when you see that the entire system was not set up for humans to be kind, harmonious, or in balance, but for us to be terrible to each other to harvest more loosh, it becomes clear. What becomes clear? That perhaps we were set up to fail. A lot of stuff here. A lot of stuff to process. But what I can say is, thus far, this book is unbelievable. I'm going to put a link in the description. You guys got to buy it and check it out and read it. And let me know in the comments if you want me to try it. Well, I'm going to do it anyways, but are you excited to see Howdie Mickoski on this channel? If I indeed can get in touch with him, and if he does want to join, would that be something you guys would be stoked about? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think of this first installation out of 3 of this amazing, amazing book, Exit the Cave, and some of the ideas contained herein? I think it's amazing. And boy, oh boy, is it nice to read a book that's in normal English after reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead. That book was so hard to read. And this just feels so fun. Just like, I can read and not have to just study so hard to get through all the, the dense language. Yeah, it's a great read. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thank you guys for joining. Once again, check me out on Instagram. Give me a follow. Reach out to me. Share your ideas with me. Let's connect there, and let's just keep this mission going. We're going to keep learning. We're going to keep growing together. We're not going to get bogged down by one perspective and just say that's all there is and be closed-minded. We're not going to do that. We're going to keep learning. We're going to keep growing. We're going to get to the bottom of this. That's all I got for you guys in this video. Thank you guys so much for joining. We'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.